My daughter called the necklace junk. She picked it up from my dresser where it had sat for 43 years, held it to the light streaming through my bedroom window, and laughed. Not a small laugh, a full, dismissive sound that seemed to fill every corner of the room I'd slept in since Robert died. "Mum, honestly, you should throw this out." She dangled the necklace between 2 fingers, like it might contaminate her. "It's tarnished, probably not even real silver, just taking up space." I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom and said nothing. She moved to my jewellery box next, the small rosewood one Robert gave me on our 25th anniversary. Her manicured fingers rifled through it with the efficiency of someone sorting trash from recycling. "This stuff is all the same. Old, worthless." She held up my grandmother's brooch, the one with the small blue stone I used to stare at as a child during long Sunday services. "I mean, who even wears brooches anymore?" "Your great-grandmother wore that," I said quietly. "Exactly." She dropped it back into the box. It made a small sound against the wood. "Ancient history. You really should clean this all out, donate it or something, make room for things that actually matter." I watched her move through my room, opening drawers, making pronouncements. My daughter, who I had raised, who I had fed and clothed and sent to college, was systematically dismissing every object I had carefully preserved. Objects that had stories, histories, weight. "The house is so cluttered, Mom, all this old stuff everywhere." She gestured vaguely at my dresser, my nightstand, the small chair by the window where I sat every morning with my tea. "You could really use a fresh start. Maybe I should help you go through everything this weekend. We could fill a whole donation truck." My hands were folded in front of me. I realized I'd been standing that way for several minutes, motionless, as though if I stayed very still, I might become invisible enough that she would simply finish and leave. "I need to get going," she said finally, checking her phone. "Busy day. But seriously, Mum, think about what I said. This place could be so much nicer if you'd just let go of all this junk." She kissed my cheek. Her perfume was expensive, something French I couldn't pronounce. She'd bought it with money from the account I'd opened for her 30th birthday. The one I'd been quietly funding for years with money from my social security, from Robert's pension, from the small inheritance my own mother left me. The door closed behind her. I heard her car start in the driveway, the smooth purr of the BMW I'd helped her buy 2 years ago when she said she needed something reliable for client meetings. I walked back into my bedroom and looked at the necklace where she'd left it, carelessly draped across my dresser. Junk. I picked it up. The weight of it was familiar in my palm, cool metal warming slowly against my skin. My grandmother had worn this. I'd seen it in photographs, resting against her collarbone in the picture taken on her wedding day in 1911. My mother had worn it exactly twice that I could remember, once to my wedding, once to my father's funeral. She'd given it to me the week before she died, her hands already trembling with the illness that would take her 3 months later. "This was my mother's," she'd whispered, "and her mother's before that. Sarah made it, I think, or maybe she bought it. I don't remember anymore, but it's ours. It's our women." I set the necklace back down carefully, adjusting it so the pendant lay flat. The afternoon sun was lowering, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors Robert had refinished himself the summer before his heart attack. I walked through the house slowly, seeing it the way my daughter must see it, cluttered, old, full of things that didn't matter. In the living room, my grandmother's tea set sat in the china cabinet. 6 cups, 6 saucers, delicate handles I'd always been afraid to use. In the dining room, the photographs my mother had framed, great aunts and great uncles whose names I barely remembered. In my study, the books Robert had collected, their spines cracked and faded. Junk. All of it junk, according to my daughter. I sat down in the chair by the window, the one she gestured at dismissively. The cushion had moulded to my shape over 8 years of morning tea, of watching the seasons change in my garden, of sitting with my thoughts in the hours before the rest of the world woke up. The house was quiet. Not the empty quiet of loneliness, but something heavier, the quiet of invisibility, of being a function rather than a person, a mother to be managed, a house to be cleaned out, objects to be donated so the real estate would show better when the time came to sell. I looked down at my hands, 73 years old, marked with age spots and the faint scars of a lifetime of cooking, cleaning, caring. My daughter had looked at them today the way she'd looked at the necklace, something past its usefulness, taking up space. The thought arrived slowly, the way most important thoughts do when you've spent decades not listening to your own mind. What if she's wrong? That night, I took the necklace from my dresser and sat with it under the lamp in my study. The metal caught the light in ways I'd forgotten, small flashes of brilliance hiding beneath decades of tarnish. I'd never thought to clean it. It seemed wrong somehow, like erasing the evidence of all the hands that had held it before mine. The pendant was unusual. I'd never really looked at it properly. Intricate metalwork formed a pattern I couldn't quite decipher. Flowers, maybe, or stars, or something older than either. There were small stones set into the design, dark now with age. My daughter had been right about one thing: it needed cleaning, but she'd been wrong about everything else. I pulled out the box of photographs from the bottom drawer of my desk, the ones I'd been meaning to organise for 20 years. My grandmother's wedding portrait was near the top. There she was, young and serious, the necklace visible even in the faded sepia tones. Behind her, barely visible in the photograph, stood another woman, older, stern-faced. Her mother, I thought, or maybe her grandmother. I'd never asked. That was the problem, wasn't it? I'd never asked. And now there was no one left to tell me. My granddaughter Emma called 3 days later. "Grandma, can I come by?" Her voice was warm, none of the brisk efficiency of her mother. I want to hear about great-great-grandma Sarah. I'm doing a family tree project for school, and Mum said you'd know the stories. Your mother said that? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Emma laughed. Well, she said you might know. Then she said most of it was probably junk anyway, and I should just make something up. Of course she did. Come whenever you like, sweetheart. She arrived that afternoon with her laptop and a genuine smile. 22 years old, in her final year at university, studying history. My son-in-law's daughter from his first marriage. Not blood-related to me at all, technically. But she'd called me Grandma since she was 6, and I'd never corrected her. She settled into Robert's old chair across from me and opened her laptop. Okay, so I know great-great-grandma Sarah came from somewhere in Europe. Poland, Russia. Mum wasn't sure. Romania, I said. She came through Ellis Island in 1908. 17 years old, alone. Emma's eyes widened. Alone? Why? Her parents had died, cholera, I think. She had an aunt in New York who'd agreed to take her in. I pulled out the photograph of Sarah I kept in the box. This is her, about 5 years after she arrived. The young woman in the photograph stared out with dark, serious eyes. She wore a simple dress and the necklace I'd been holding 3 nights ago. That's the necklace. Emma leaned forward. The one upstairs? I saw Mom looking at it last week. She said it was worthless. Something shifted in my chest. A small rebellion, quiet but distinct. Your mother, I said carefully, doesn't know everything. Emma grinned. Tell me about it. We spent 2 hours going through photographs. I told her what I knew. Sarah's journey, her marriage to a man whose family owned a small jewelry shop in the Bronx, her 3 children born in quick succession, my grandmother, her eldest. The necklace passed down through generations of women who'd survived, who'd endured, who'd built lives from nothing. This is amazing, Emma said, making notes. Do you have any of Sarah's things, besides the necklace? I hesitated. Then I got up and brought down the small items I'd kept. A pair of earrings, the brooch my daughter had dismissed, a delicate bracelet I'd never worn. Emma photographed each one, her historian's eye noting details I'd never noticed. Grandma, these are really interesting. See this hallmark? She pointed to a tiny mark on the bracelet. This might actually be really old, like valuable old. Your mother said it was all junk. Mum says a lot of things. Emma looked up at me with an expression that reminded me suddenly, painfully, of my own mother. Direct, unafraid. You should get them appraised, just to know. The word hung in the air between us, appraised. It seemed absurd. These were family things, worn by family hands. Their value wasn't in money. But then again, what harm could it do to know? There's a place downtown, Emma continued, gathering momentum. A friend of mine had some estate jewellery appraised there. They're supposed to be really good, very honest. I could get you the address. I looked at the necklace in Emma's hands, at the way the light caught the stones even through the tarnish, at the photographs spread across my desk. Women I'd barely known, carrying objects I'd barely valued. What if she's wrong? The thought from 3 days ago returned, stronger now. Yes, I heard myself say, get me the address. Emma beamed. You're going to be surprised, Grandma. I have a feeling. After she left, I sat for a long time with the jewellery spread across my desk. 4 generations of women, 4 generations of survival, of building lives, of passing down what mattered even when no one seemed to value it anymore. My daughter had called it junk, had wanted me to throw it away, donate it, clear it out like I was already halfway to the grave and my things were just clutter waiting to be discarded. But Emma had seen something different. Emma had seen history. I picked up the necklace again. My hands didn't tremble. For the first time in 8 years, since Robert died and left me alone in this house with my daughter's increasingly frequent suggestions about downsizing and donations and getting rid of things, I felt something that wasn't resignation. I felt curious, and underneath that, something sharper. I felt defiant. I drove myself to the appraiser's office on a Tuesday morning in October. My daughter would have insisted on driving me if she'd known, would have made it about my failing eyesight or slower reflexes, but my license was current and my eyesight was fine, and I'd been driving these streets for 50 years. The independence felt like a small victory. The shop was tucked between a used bookstore and a coffee shop I'd never noticed before. The kind of place you'd walk past 100 times without seeing. A discreet sign in the window read Rothstein and Associates, Fine Jewellery and Estate Appraisals. I'd made an appointment, given my name, to a pleasant-sounding woman on the phone who'd asked me to bring any documentation I might have about the pieces. I had none, of course, just the jewellery itself, wrapped carefully in tissue paper in my purse, and my own fragmented memories of the women who'd worn them. A bell chimed as I pushed open the door. The interior was quiet, professional. Display cases lined the walls, filled with pieces that gleamed under careful lighting. A young woman looked up from behind a desk and smiled. Mrs. Peterson? Yes. Mr. Rothstein is ready for you. Right this way. She led me through a doorway into a smaller room, more workspace than showroom. An older man stood as I entered, extending his hand. He was perhaps 70 himself, with careful eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Peterson, thank you for coming in. Please, sit. Would you like some water? Coffee? No, thank you. I sat in the chair he indicated and pulled the tissue-wrapped bundle from my purse. My hands were steady as I unwrapped each piece and laid them on the black velvet cloth he'd placed on the desk. The necklace, the brooch, the earrings, the bracelet. They looked small and insignificant against the velvet, tarnished and unremarkable. Junk, my daughter had said. Mr. Rothstein was silent for a long moment. Then he reached for a loupe and pulled the desk lamp closer. He picked up the necklace first, examining it with the kind of attention I'd never given anything in my life. Minutes passed. He made small sounds. And interesting. And once, very quietly, my God. "Where did you say you got these?" he asked, not looking up. "They've been in my family. My great-grandmother brought them from Romania in 1908. He set down the necklace carefully and picked up the brooch. More silence, more examination. He opened a drawer and pulled out what looked like a jeweller's scale, weighing each piece with precision. He took photographs. He made notes in a small leather book. I sat very still and watched him work. Finally, he set down the last piece, the bracelet Emma had noticed the hallmark on, and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Peterson, I need to ask you some questions."
"These pieces, you said they came from Romania?"
"Yes. My great-grandmother Sarah, she came through Ellis Island."
"And they've been in your family since then?"
"Never sold, never separated."
"Never. They've been passed down, grandmother to mother to granddaughter."
He nodded slowly. "Do you know anything about Sarah's family? Her background?" "Very little. She was young when she came, an orphan." "The reason I ask," he said carefully, "is that these pieces are not costume jewellery. They're not even ordinary antique jewellery." My heart had started beating faster. I could feel it in my chest, in my throat. The necklace alone is extraordinary. The metalwork is hand-forged, probably late 18th or early 19th century. The stones are Transylvanian garnets. You can see the characteristic deep red colour even through the tarnish. But more than that, the design is distinctive. This particular style was associated with a specific region of Transylvania, with wealthy Jewish families who commissioned pieces from master craftsmen. He paused, letting me absorb this. The brooch is similar in style and period. The bracelet is even older, possibly 17th century. The hallmark Emma noticed is a maker's mark from a workshop in Cluj. These pieces, Mrs. Peterson, are museum quality. They should be in a collection somewhere, documented and preserved. The room felt very small suddenly. Museum quality. The words didn't make sense applied to things that had sat in my jewellery box for 43 years, things my daughter had called junk. What are they worth? My voice came out quieter than I intended. Mr. Rothstein took off his glasses and cleaned them carefully with a cloth from his pocket. "I'll need to do more research to give you a precise figure. But, conservatively, the necklace alone is worth somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000, possibly more if we can document the provenance." $300,000, $500,000. I heard the numbers, but they felt abstract, impossible, like he was speaking a language I didn't understand. "The entire collection," he continued gently. assuming authenticity can be verified, and I have every reason to believe it can be, is worth between $1 and $2 million. These are rare pieces, Mrs. Peterson, exceptionally rare. I sat in the quiet office and looked at the jewellery on the black velvet, junk. My daughter had touched these pieces, had held them in her hands and called them worthless, had suggested I donate them, throw them away. "I'd like to connect you with a colleague at the Metropolitan Museum," Mr. Rothstein was saying. "They have an expert in Eastern European decorative arts who would be very interested in documenting these. And if you're interested in selling, though I would strongly encourage you to think carefully about that. I have contacts with auction houses, but again, I'd want the provenance fully researched first. Museum, auction houses, millions of dollars." I felt very far away from myself, watching this conversation happen to someone else. "Mrs. Peterson, are you all right?" I looked up at him. "Yes, I'm just processing." He smiled kindly. "It's a lot to take in. Why don't I prepare a formal written appraisal for you? It will take me about a week. In the meantime, I'd strongly suggest keeping these pieces somewhere very secure. A safe deposit box would be ideal." I nodded, not trusting my voice. I drove home carefully, both hands on the wheel, the jewellery back in my purse on the passenger seat. The October sunlight seemed too bright, the streets too loud. Everything felt slightly unreal. In my driveway, I sat in the car for 10 minutes before going inside. $1 to $2 million. Junk. The phone rang that evening. My daughter's name appeared on the screen. I looked at it and let it ring through to voicemail. She called again the next morning, again that afternoon. I didn't answer. It wasn't cruelty, it was self-preservation. I wasn't ready to hear her voice yet, to field her questions, to watch her recalibrate now that my junk had become worth millions. I needed time to think, to understand what this meant, to decide what I wanted to do with this information. Mr. Rothstein's colleague from the museum called on Thursday. Dr. Patricia Chen, an expert in Judaica and Eastern European decorative arts. Her voice was bright with excitement, barely contained by professional courtesy. "Mrs. Peterson, I've seen the photographs Mr. Rothstein sent. I have to tell you, I've been studying this field for 20 years and I've never seen pieces quite like these outside of museum collections. Would you be willing to let me examine them in person and perhaps speak with a reporter friend of mine? The New York Times has been doing a series on hidden treasures in immigrant families. Your story would be perfect." The New York Times. The words should have frightened me, should have sent me back into my comfortable invisibility. But something had shifted when Mr. Rothstein had used the word museum. "Yes," I said, "I'd be willing." The interview happened in my living room 2 weeks later. The reporter was younger than Emma, a woman named Sarah Liu, who sat on my couch with a recording device and looked at me like I was someone worth listening to. Dr. Chen had come with her, and together they photographed the jewellery, documented every detail, asked questions about Sarah and the women who'd come after her. "Tell me about your great-grandmother," Sarah Liu said. "What was her life like after she arrived?" I told her what I knew. The small apartment in the Bronx, the marriage to Jacob, whose family's jewellery shop barely kept them fed during the Depression, Sarah's hands ruined by washing other people's clothes, her 3 children raised in 2 rooms, the way she'd kept these pieces hidden, wrapped in cloth, touched only on holidays. She must have known what they were worth, Sarah Liu said. I thought about that. Maybe. Or maybe she just knew what they meant, where they came from, who she'd been before. And your daughter had no idea? The question hung in the air. I chose my words carefully. My daughter saw old jewellery that needed cleaning. She couldn't see the history, the women, the survival. Sarah Liu wrote that down. The article appeared 3 weeks later, on a Sunday. Emma texted me a photo of it before I'd even gotten out of bed. It took up half a page in the Metro section with a large photograph of me holding the necklace. The headline read, "Holocaust survivor's descendant discovers family treasures worth millions." I read it slowly, twice, sitting at my kitchen table with my morning tea cooling in the cup Emma had noticed last month. Part of Sarah's tea set, brought from Romania in a trunk, used every day for 30 years. The article told my great-grandmother's story. The probable wealthy family killed in pogroms. Sarah's escape. Her life in New York, cleaning houses while wearing her mother's jewellery hidden under her clothes. The pieces passed down through generations of women who didn't realise what they had, who'd valued them only as family history. And then, in the final paragraphs, my daughter's dismissal. Sarah Liu had written it tactfully, without naming names, but there it was. When Peterson's daughter suggested the jewellery might be worthless and should be donated, Peterson decided to have the pieces appraised, a decision that would reveal one of the most significant discoveries of Eastern European Judaica in recent years. My phone started ringing at 9 a.m. My daughter. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 9:30, 10, 11. By noon, she'd called 7 times and sent 4 text messages. "Mum, I saw the article. Call me. Mum, why didn't you tell me? This is incredible. Mum, we need to talk about security, about insurance. Call me back. Mum, seriously, pick up the phone." I turned my phone to silent and poured myself more tea. The isolation had weight to it. I could feel it settling into the house, into the spaces where my daughter's voice usually filled the air with plans and suggestion, and gentle insistence. Part of me wanted to call her back, to smooth things over, to pretend nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I wasn't invisible anymore. The article had done that. Hundreds of thousands of people had read my story over their Sunday coffee. I'd received calls from a museum curator, a graduate student writing a dissertation, 2 different auction houses. A television producer had left a voicemail about appearing on a morning talk show. For the first time in 8 years, strangers saw me as a person with a story worth hearing. Not as someone's mother to be managed, not as an elderly woman taking up space, as myself. Margaret Peterson, keeper of history, descendant of survivors. I looked at my phone. 8 missed calls now, 9, 10. I could call her back, explain, share this moment. Or I could sit with this silence a while longer, let her wonder, let her feel what it was like to be dismissed, to be ignored, to call and get no response. My tea had gone cold. I poured it out and made a fresh cup, watching the steam rise in the afternoon light. Outside my window, fall was settling in properly now. The leaves on my maple tree had turned gold and orange. Soon they'd fall, and winter would come, and I'd sit in this same chair watching snow instead of leaves. But for now, for this moment, I sat in the quiet I'd chosen. And it didn't feel lonely. It felt like space. Space to think. Space to decide. Space to be someone other than the person my daughter needed me to be. The phone buzzed with another call. I let it ring. I appeared on Morning America 3 weeks after the article ran. The producer who'd called me turned out to be a woman named Janet Rodriguez, warm and enthusiastic, who sent a car to pick me up at 5 a.m. and treated me like I was someone important. In the green room, I sat in a chair while a makeup artist worked on my face, making small talk about the weather. I watched myself in the mirror, this 73-year-old woman being carefully highlighted and powdered, and thought about all the times I'd been invisible, all the times I'd spoken and not been heard, entered rooms and not been noticed, sat in chairs while my daughter made plans for my life without asking my opinion. "You're going to be great," the makeup artist said, smiling at my reflection. I smiled back. Maybe I would be. The interview lasted 7 minutes. I sat across from the host, Amanda Wright, and told Sarah's story again. I held the necklace up to the camera so viewers could see the intricate metalwork, the garnets catching the studio lights. Amanda asked intelligent questions, listened to my answers, treated me like an expert on my own family's history. "What did it feel like," she asked near the end, "when you discovered what these pieces were really worth?" I thought about my daughter's voice calling them junk, about Emma's eyes widening over the hallmark, about Mr. Rothstein's quiet "my God." "It felt like being seen," I said, "like these women, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, who'd been invisible in their own way, who'd survived and endured and passed down what they could, were finally being recognized. Their survival mattered, their choices mattered, they mattered, Amanda nodded, understanding. "And what will you do with the collection now?" "I'm still deciding," I said. And that was true. I'd been turning it over in my mind for weeks. Sell them, keep them, donate them. Every option felt weighted with meaning, with consequence. "But whatever I do," I added, "it will be my choice." The camera held on my face for a moment. Then Amanda smiled. "Margaret Peterson, thank you for sharing your remarkable story. My daughter called before I'd even left the studio, 15 times in the hour I spent in the car back to my house. I turned my phone off. The museum request arrived 2 days later, delivered by courier. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was organizing an exhibition on Jewish life in Eastern Europe, 1600 to 1945. They wanted to borrow my entire collection for 6 months. The letter was formal, respectful, addressed to me as though I were a colleague, a fellow curator of history. I sat with the letter for a long time, 6 months in a museum, behind glass, documented, photographed, studied. Thousands of people would see them, would read about Sarah, would understand maybe what it meant to carry your whole world in a piece of jewellery. I called Dr. Chen. "Yes," I said, "they can borrow the pieces." "Oh, Margaret." Her voice was warm. We'd moved to first names after the 3rd phone call. "This is wonderful. I'll start the paperwork." "We'll need to insure them, of course, and the museum will provide security for transport." This is going to be one of the highlights of the exhibition. After I hung up, I walked through my house slowly. The same house my daughter had called cluttered. The same objects she'd wanted me to donate. I picked up things as I passed, a small silver frame with my mother's picture, a ceramic bowl Robert had bought me in Portugal, the tea set Sarah had carried across an ocean. None of it was junk. All of it mattered. My phone, turned back on, showed 23 missed calls, all from my daughter. No voicemails from anyone else. Emma had texted instead. "Grandma, you were amazing on TV. So proud of you." I texted her back. "Thank you, sweetheart. Come for tea this weekend?" Her response came immediately. "Yes, want to hear everything." But from my daughter, just the relentless calls. No texts, no messages, just the demand of her presence, the expectation that I would answer, that I would explain, that I would include her now that my junk had become important. I made myself dinner that night. Salmon, roasted vegetables, a glass of wine. I ate slowly at my dining room table, using Sarah's plates. I'd never used them before, had kept them safe in the cabinet for some future important occasion that never seemed to arrive. But this felt like occasion enough. This quiet meal alone, this deliberate choosing of what mattered. The salmon was good, the vegetables perfectly roasted. The wine made my head feel pleasantly light. I was alone in my house, my daughter's calls unanswered, and I felt more powerful than I had in 8 years. More powerful, maybe, than I'd ever felt. After dinner, I pulled out the folder Emma had helped me create. Photographs of Sarah, of my grandmother, of my mother. Documents I'd found. Sarah's Ellis Island records, my grandmother's birth certificate, my mother's wedding announcement. The kind of paperwork that builds a life, that proves you existed, that shows the path from there to here. I spread them out on the table and started organizing them chronologically, building the story, building the proof that these women had mattered, that their choices had led to me sitting here now, deciding what happened next. My phone rang again. My daughter. I looked at her name on the screen. Not yet, I thought. I'm not ready yet. I let it ring through to voicemail and went back to my documents. Emma came for tea on Saturday. She brought her boyfriend, a quiet young man named Marcus who studied architecture and listened more than he talked. They sat in my living room, Marcus in Robert's chair, Emma on the couch, both of them looking at me like I was someone remarkable. "Grandma, you were incredible," Emma said for the 3rd time. "Everyone I know saw the interviews. My professor asked if I could get you to come speak to our oral history class."
About what?
About preserving family stories, about how objects carry memory. She gestured at the room. "All of this, it's not just stuff, it's history. You were right and Mum was wrong, and now the whole world knows it." I poured tea into Sarah's cups. "Your mother was doing what she thought was best. She was being dismissive." Emma's voice had an edge I recognized. My own edge, the one that had been growing sharper these past weeks. "She treated you like you were senile, like your things didn't matter."
They do matter,
Marcus said quietly. "What you're doing with the museum exhibition, that matters. You're giving those women a voice." I looked at this young man, this stranger who saw what my own daughter had missed. "Thank you," I said. After they left, I called the lawyer Emma had recommended, Grace Thornton, Estate Planning and Trusts. Her office was in Manhattan, elegant and expensive looking. We met on Monday afternoon. Grace was perhaps 50, efficient and kind. She listened as I explained what I wanted to do. Not a will revision, not yet. Something more deliberate, more permanent. "I want to establish a foundation," I said, "in my great-grandmother's name. The Sarah Levinson Memorial Foundation for Holocaust Education and Preservation of Immigrant Stories." Grace made notes. "What assets are you thinking of using to fund it?" "The jewellery collection. When I decide to sell, if I decide to sell, the proceeds go to the foundation. And my house. When I die, it's sold, and those proceeds also go to the foundation. Nothing goes to my daughter." I said it calmly, matter of fact. But Grace looked up from her notes, met my eyes. "Are you certain about this? It's a significant decision." "I'm certain." "May I ask why?" I thought about how to explain it. The years of dismissal, the suggestions about downsizing, the casual cruelty of junk, the phone calls that demanded access without offering respect. "My daughter sees me as someone to be managed," I said finally, "as a problem to be solved." She wanted me to throw away the things that mattered most to me because they didn't matter to her. She didn't ask, she didn't listen, she just assumed. Grace nodded. "And if she changes? If she apologizes, then she can volunteer for the foundation, work with the programs we'll create, earn her way back into my life through actions, not words." Grace smiled slightly. "You've thought this through. I've had time." We spent 2 hours going through the details, the foundation's mission, the board structure, myself, Emma, Grace, Dr. Chen, and one position to be filled later, the educational programs we'd fund, the grants for immigrant family history preservation, the scholarship in Sarah's name. By the time I left Grace's office, it was dark outside. The city lights reflected off the windows of buildings, and I walked 3 blocks to the subway station feeling like I was carrying something lighter than air. I'd built something permanent, something that would outlast me, something that honoured the women who'd come before and would help the people who'd come after, something that was mine. At home, I sat at my desk and wrote the letter to my daughter by hand. It took me 3 drafts to get the tone right, not angry, not apologetic, simply clear. "Dear Catherine, I know you've been trying to reach me. I've needed time to think about what I want to say. When you called my grandmother's jewellery junk, you didn't just dismiss objects. You dismissed the women who wore them. You dismissed my connection to them. You dismissed my judgment. I've spent 8 years accepting your suggestions about my life, what to keep, what to discard, how to live in my own house. I let you make decisions for me because I convinced myself you knew better, that I was too old, too out of touch, too much of a burden to argue. I was wrong to give you that power, and you were wrong to assume it. I'm establishing a foundation in Sarah's name. The jewellery collection, if sold, will fund it. My house, when I'm gone, will fund it. You are not in my will anymore. You are not part of these decisions. This isn't punishment, it's a boundary. I'm taking back the space you took from me. I'm choosing what matters. I'm remembering that I'm a person, not a problem to be solved. If you want to be in my life, you're welcome, but on different terms. Terms where you see me, where you listen, where you respect that my choices about my own things, my own life, are mine to make. I hope you can understand this, but if you can't, I'll understand that too. Mom. I read it twice, folded it, put it in an envelope, addressed it to her apartment in the city, then I walked to the mailbox at the corner and dropped it in. The walk back to my house felt longer than usual. My body ached with the day's activities, the tea with Emma, the subway ride, the lawyer meeting, the letter writing. I was 73 years old, and I'd done more in one day than I'd done in months. Inside, I made myself chamomile tea and sat in my chair by the window, the same chair my daughter had gestured at dismissively, the chair that was mine, that I'd chosen, that I'd sat in every morning for 8 years watching the garden change. I felt powerful. I felt sad. I felt certain. And I felt, for the first time in a very long time, like the choices I was making were actually mine to make. My daughter appeared at my door 4 days after I mailed the letter. I'd been expecting her in a way. The letter had forced a response that phone calls couldn't. She didn't knock, she had a key. I'd given it to her 8 years ago. When Robert died, and she insisted she needed to be able to get in if something happened to me, now she used it, walking into my house the way she'd walked into my bedroom that day in September, with the assumption of access. I was in the kitchen making lunch. I heard the door open, heard her footsteps in the hallway. "Mum?" I turned off the stove, dried my hands on a towel, walked into the living room where she stood, still in her coat, my letter crumpled in her hand. "Catherine." We looked at each other. She'd been crying. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red. For a moment she looked young, lost, like the child I'd raised. Then her face hardened. "How could you do this? How could you cut me out?" "Sit down," I said.
I don't want to sit down. I want you to explain why you're punishing me.
"I'm not punishing you. I'm setting a boundary."
By taking away my inheritance? By writing me out of your will?
"That's not a boundary, Mom. That's cruelty." I sat down in my chair. After a moment, she sat too, perched on the edge of the couch. "The jewellery was never yours," I said quietly. "This house was never yours. My choices were never yours to make. But somewhere along the way, you started acting like they were, like I was just the temporary guardian of things you'd eventually take over. That's not fair, isn't it? You wanted me to throw away Sarah's jewellery. You called it junk. You didn't ask me about it, about what it meant, about where it came from. You just looked at old things in an old woman's house and decided they didn't matter. I didn't know they were worth millions." Her voice rose. "How was I supposed to know?" "This isn't about money, Catherine. Then what's it about?" I looked at her, at my only child, this woman I'd raised and loved and somehow lost along the way. "It's about being seen," I said. "You looked at me that day and saw someone to be managed, someone whose opinions didn't matter, someone too old to know what was valuable. You've been looking at me that way for years." She opened her mouth, closed it. Tears started running down her face. "I was trying to help," she said finally. "I know, but you never asked if I needed help. You never asked what I wanted. You just decided." "Like you just decided to establish a foundation without telling me? To cut me out without a conversation?" "Yes," I said, "like that." The silence stretched between us. Outside, a car passed. Inside, the house creaked the way old houses do. "I'm sorry," she said. The words came out rough. I'm sorry I called it junk. I'm sorry I didn't ask. I'm sorry I treated you like you didn't know what you were doing. I nodded. Thank you. Is that enough? Will you change the will back? No. She flinched. Why not? Because sorry is the beginning, not the end. Because I need to see that things are actually different, that you actually see me differently. What do you want from me? I want you to earn your way back, I said. The foundation needs volunteers. We're going to run oral history workshops, preservation programs, Holocaust education initiatives. You could help with that. You're good at organization, at management. Those skills matter. But you'd have to actually do the work, not just show up because I'm your mother. Actually commit. She stared at me. You're serious? Yes. And if I do that, if I volunteer, if I help, then what? Then we rebuild on different terms, where you respect that I'm still a person capable of making my own choices, where you ask instead of assuming, where you see me, Catherine, not as your future inheritance or your burden to manage, as me. She wiped her eyes, looked around the living room at all the things she'd wanted me to throw away. I didn't know, she said softly. I really didn't know the jewelry was valuable. I know, but you should have known it mattered. That was enough. She nodded slowly. Can I think about it, the volunteering? Of course. She stood, walked to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. The article said you discovered the jewelry's value, but you didn't discover it. Someone else saw it. The appraiser. Emma suggested I get it appraised, I said. I made the decision to actually do it. Why? Why did you finally do it? I thought about that day in September. The way her laugh had echoed in my bedroom, the casual dismissal, the moment when I'd asked myself, what if she's wrong? Because I decided to trust myself more than I trusted your judgment, I said. She flinched again, then nodded. That's fair. After she left, I sat for a long time in the quiet. The conversation had been hard, honest, painful for both of us, but it had been real. For the first time in years, we'd talked to each other instead of past each other. I didn't know if she'd volunteer, didn't know if things would actually change, but I knew I'd said what needed to be said, set the boundaries that needed to be set. That evening, Emma came over as planned. We sat at my dining room table with Grace on speakerphone, finalising the foundation paperwork. Signatures, notarisations, the transformation of intention into legal reality. Congratulations, Margaret, Grace said when we finished. The Sarah Levinson Memorial Foundation is now officially established. Emma squeezed my hand. Great-great-grandma would be proud. I thought about Sarah, 17 years old, alone on a ship crossing the Atlantic, with everything she owned wrapped in cloth and hidden in a trunk. She'd built a life from nothing. She'd survived. She'd passed down what mattered. And now her name would live on. not just in family stories, but in classrooms and workshops and scholarships, in the lives of people who'd never met her, but who'd benefit from what she'd endured. After Emma left, I went to my study and pulled out the box of documents I'd been organising: birth certificates, marriage licenses, death certificates, immigration papers, the bureaucratic proof of lives lived. I spread them out on the desk and began arranging them chronologically, creating a timeline from Sarah's birth in Romania in 1891 to my own birth in 1952 to Emma's birth in 2003. 4 generations over 100 years. Wars and migrations and losses and survival. I worked until midnight, my back aching, my eyes tired, my hands careful with the fragile paper. When I finished, I had a complete record, a provenance not just of jewellery, but of people, of women who'd mattered, who'd survived, who'd built something that lasted. I stood and looked at the timeline spread across my desk. This was the legacy. Not the money, not even the jewellery. The women, the survival, the choice to be seen. The museum exhibition opened in March, 6 months after that September day when my daughter had called my grandmother's necklace junk. Emma and I arrived together. Marcus drove us into the city, dropped us at the museum entrance. We walked through the main hall, past the crowds and the school groups, to the special exhibition wing. Jewish Life in Eastern Europe, 1600 to 1945, read the banner over the entrance. Inside, in a climate-controlled case in the centre of the room, Sarah's jewellery gleamed under professional lighting. The necklace, the brooch, the bracelet, the earrings. Each piece cleaned carefully, restored to the brilliance it had lost over decades of being worn by women who were too busy surviving to polish silver. A placard next to the case told the story. Sarah Levinson, born Romania, 1891, emigrated to New York, 1908, the probable wealthy family. The pieces passed down through 4 generations, the discovery in 2024, from the collection of Margaret Peterson in memory of Sarah Levinson and all the women who carried their worlds with them. I stood there for a long time, looking at objects I'd seen every day for 43 years, now transformed by context and lighting and the knowledge of what they'd survived. Emma slipped her hand into mine. "She'd be proud, Grandma." "Yes," I said. "I think she would be." We walked slowly through the exhibition, other pieces, other stories, other families, but Sarah's jewellery was the centrepiece, the story Dr. Chen had chosen to anchor the whole display. Near the exit, I saw her, my daughter, Catherine, standing alone in front of the case that held Sarah's jewellery, reading the placard, reading my name. She must have felt me looking. She turned. Our eyes met across the room. I could have turned away, could have left through the other exit, but Emma was with me, and something about the moment felt important. Final, maybe. or knew. I walked over. Emma stayed back, giving us space. "Hi, Mom," Catherine said quietly. "Hi." We stood together, looking at the jewellery. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she said, very softly, "I volunteered yesterday for the foundation. Grace sent me the information." "I know," she told me. "I'm going to try to earn my way back, like you said." I nodded. "Thank you." She looked at me then, really looked at me, the way she hadn't in years. "You were right about all of it. I wasn't seeing you, I was seeing what I expected, what I assumed. And now I'm trying to actually see. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet. Maybe not ever, not completely, but it was something, a beginning, a possibility. The jewellery is beautiful," she said. "They did a good job with the restoration. Yes, I'm sorry I called it junk, I know." We stood there a few moments longer. Then she kissed my cheek carefully, tentatively, and walked away. Emma came back, slipped her arm through mine. "You okay, Grandma?" "Yes, I am." If you're reading this and you recognise yourself, the one who always says yes, the one who keeps peace at the cost of your own voice, the one whose things get called junk because no one bothered to ask what they mean, I want you to know something. Your silence isn't kindness, it's abandonment of yourself. Your no isn't selfishness, it's a reminder that you're a person, not a function, not a problem to be solved, not a burden to be managed, and it's never too late. I was 73 when I finally decided to trust my own judgment over my daughter's dismissal. 73 when I drove myself to an appraiser and changed my life. 73 when I remembered that I mattered. You matter too. Your history matters. Your choices matter. The things you've kept, the stories you carry, the life you've built, they're not clutter waiting to be cleared out. They're proof that you survived, that you endured, that you're here, and you have the right to be seen on your own terms, in your own time, by your own choice. I went home that evening and sat in my chair by the window, the same chair I'd sat in every morning for 8 years. But the view had changed. The garden was different now, spring coming, new growth pushing up through old soil. The house was quiet, but it was my quiet, chosen, deliberate. On my finger I wore my grandmother's ring, not part of the museum exhibition, kept for myself, a small rebellion, a small claim. The phone rang. I looked at it, my daughter's name on the screen. I picked up. "Hello, Catherine," I said, and for the first time in years, I meant it.